Hello everyone. Welcome to the course of Survey of Major English-Speaking Countries. Today, we are going to learn Chapter 12, Economy of the United States. This lecture is about Lesson A, the Westward Movement of the United States. After the settlements for 1 century and a half, the 13 colonies in North America had developed a similar American pattern in politics, economy, and cultural life, and enjoying the same frontier environment. The 13 colonies along the east coast of the Atlantic were Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire in New England in the northeast, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New York, and New Jersey in the mid-Atlantic, and Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia in the south. The English people and the Europeans had become American, and they were ready to separate themselves from the old world. The American Revolution officially proclaimed the birth of a new nation of Americans. At the beginnings of the 19th century, America was just a young nationality with a narrow strip of 13 states at the coast of the Atlantic Ocean. With more and more people flooding in, they were looking for more natural resources, commercial opportunities, agricultural land to build a better life. Between 1803 and 1861, the people and the institution of the country expanded into what is almost today, with 3 million square miles in border. It is a process of economic exploitation and a territory expansion waged by the Americans from Appalachian Mountain to the west. Land hunger became a fever, even for the government, in the single biggest real estate deal in history. President Thomas Jefferson bought vast Louisiana territory from French King Napoleon Bonaparte. Through purchasing or war, America laid hands on Florida, Texas, Oregon, and California, just as America will one day go to the moon. A new mission was carried out into the unknown world of the West. In May 1804, a presidential aide and a junior army officer, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, set out on a mapping expedition. Their journey was about to become one of the most epic tales of survival in American history. At that time, the Rockies, unknown, mythical, was never expected to be 90 separate mountain ranges and 3,000 miles long. They were caught in death trap. After 2 weeks, starvation set in. They ate any plants they can find, and next, they ate their horses. But they survived. They owed their survival to a 16-year-old Native American girl named Sacagawea, who guided them, found wild food, and saved their precious million-word journals from an overturned canoe. They were the first new Americans to reach the Pacific Ocean overland. Their remarkable expedition discovered more than 300 species of wildlife, transforming science and agriculture. More importantly, hundreds of thousands of people followed their path to the American West. The trails the first Americans headed west became settler paths, wagon trails, roads, and later railway express. Americans followed the tracks west in a tidal of hope. Thousands of men, women, children were heading a new life 2,000 miles away by riding, walking, and pushing. Just as people commented in the newspaper, it is a land of opportunities. You can make of yourself what you want. You are only held back by your own desires. Germans, Belgians, French, Catholics, Mormons launched one of the greatest mass migrations. They can walk 10 miles a day for up to 6 months straight. By 1840, nearly 7 million Americans, 40% of the nation's population, lived in the West. Most of these people had left their homes in the East in search of economic opportunity. Like Thomas Jefferson, many of these pioneers associated westward migration, land ownership, and farming with freedom. In Europe, a large number of factory workers formed a dependent and a seemingly permanent working class. By contrast, in the United States, the Western frontier offered the possibility of independence and upward mobility for all. Despite some conflicts of whether keeping slavery in the new states, Americans kept on migrating west. Thousands of people moved into the Mexican territory of California, New Mexico, and Texas. In 1837, American settlers in Texas wanted to win independence and join the United States as a slave state. After the American-Mexican War, the defeated Mexico was forced to give up huge territory. The same moment California became American, it became the nation's greatest treasure. Volcanic magma created cores in the process of cooling and pressure over millions of years. And within the cores is gold. The seam is one of the densest on the planet. Rocks eroded, and the riches were released. January 24, 1848, carpenter James Marshall found a 3-ounce nugget in the California River, which was 2 months' pay in his hand, and millions of dollars more beneath his feet. Rumors soon started to spread. News of Marshall's discovery spread to every corner of the world. In California, you can taste the American dream. The news of gold brought approximately 300,000 people to California from the rest of the United States and abroad. The sudden influx of gold into the money supply reinvigorated the American economy, and the sudden population increase allowed California to go rapidly to statehood. In 2 years, the population of California exploded from 15,000 to 100,000. The arrival of hundreds of thousands of people propelled the American West from a sleepy, unknown wilderness to be the center of the global imagination. Roads, schools, churches, and civic organizations quickly came into existence. The wealth and the population increase led to significant improved transportation. New methods developed as steamship came into service. And just a decade later, railways were built across the country from the west to the eastern United States. Besides, the new immigrants often showed remarkable inventiveness and creativity. They brought and invented numerous technologies and machines. During the westward expansion, towns and cities were charted, state constitution was written, election held. Representatives were sent to Washington, D.C. to negotiate the admission of new states. The West is open to business. The West had been America's new economic powerhouse. From the dirt and the people's dream came the great cities and states. Though faced with incredible hardships, their efforts and experience shaped American characters and built America as a new nation. Settler families with 8 or 10 members lived in a log cabin built from scratch, usually single-roomed and basic. The wilderness provided everything. They made their own forks, shovels, and racks, built their own furniture, and buried the dead. In bad years, malaria killed 1 in 8 of the settlers. Life expectancy is half of what it is today. but still, people came. In addition, frontiers offered opportunities for success to those who worked hard. As a result, pioneers tended to be optimistic about the future and concerned with material wealth. Boastfulness and self-confidence emerged as frontier traits as well. American Westward Movement in the 19th century was the process of economic exploitation and territory expansion waged by the Americans from Appalachian Mountain to the west from the end 18th century to the end of the 19th century. It lasted about 100 years, and American territory was expanded from 13 colonies at the coast of the Atlantic Ocean to vast shores of the Pacific Ocean. This movement was a large-scale and far-reaching social migration. During the Westward Movement, the government laid out a series of policies, such as immigrant policy and capital investment. The land policy of American governments at that moment provided institution and policy guarantee for peasants to get the soil and develop agriculture. They not only contributed to the expansion of American territory, influenced American politics, but also formed American characters. At last, the frontier life in Westward Movement brought plentiful source material to American cultures and arts in the future. Western exploitation utterly changed American appearance. Large quantity of land were reclaimed. A lot of capital farms were set up. The development of agriculture in West provided a large amount of food, material, and a domestic market on industrial development. Natural resources were opened up to develop industries. Furthermore, trade and transportation had got new lips. Westward Movement has played an important role in popular culture. Westerns and the stories about their life on the frontier have been popular in the United States and throughout the world. The exploits and adversities of those who moved west, from mountain man and cowboy to women homesteaders, have been the subjects of countless novels, poems, paintings, films, and television programs. Westward Movement continues to be a part of national life on literature. However, this expansion also resulted in great suffering, destruction, and cultural loss for the Native Americans. Westward Movement was the foundation of the modern civilization for the country. It was also a devastation on the other civilizations. The gold fever initiated the California Genocide. Native Americans, dependent on traditional hunting, gathering, and agriculture, became victims of starvation and diseases. As toxic chemicals from prospecting operations polluted the environment and destroyed habitats, the huge number of newcomers were driving Native Americans out of their traditional hunting, fishing, and food gathering areas. To protect their homes and livelihood, some Native Americans responded by attacking the miners. These provoked counterattacks on native villages. The Native Americans, outgunned, were often slaughtered. In many areas, systematic attack against the Indians frequently occurred. Their homes were burned down. Cultures were eradicated. Many tribes were forced to relocate onto reservations. U.S. Army Private John G. Burnett wrote, "The suffering of Indians were awful. The Trail of Exiles was a trail of death. I saw as many as 20 die in a single night of pneumonia, cold exposure." The Act for the Government and the Protection of Indians, passed on April 22, 1850, by the California legislature, allowed settlers to continue to the California practice of capturing and using native people as bonded workers. It also provided the basis for the enslavement and trafficking in Native American labor, particularly that of young women and children, which was carried on as a legal business enterprise. Raids on villages were made to supply the demand. The young women and children were carried off to be sold. The men and the remaining people often being killed in genocidal attacks. Despite resistance in various conflicts, the Native American population in California, estimated at 150,000 in 1845, was less than 30,000 by 1870. In the past, American Indians had a brilliant civilization which shined over the areas of North America. Unfortunately, they lay down silently under the light of a museum after the American government suppressing the way of their life. The West had produced great wealth and supplied enormous resources to others in the nation and the world. This production, however, had often resulted in enormous environmental damage. The pioneers became extremely wasteful because they lived among such plentiful nature resources. Pioneers cut down vast areas of forests, lost large amounts of gold and other minerals in careless mining operations, and exhausted the soil.